Welcome to this special expedition into the deepest reaches of the abyss. This is an exclusive journey, crafted for those who seek the silence that only the ocean floor can provide. Before we begin our descent, consider joining our crew. Subscribe to Deep Ocean Mysteries so you never miss a dive into the unknown. Tonight, we descend 36,000 feet to witness something that biology cannot explain. Scientists call it the Phantom Sentinel. Imagine a predator, vast and ancient, but with skin as translucent as glass. Its skeletal structure glows with a faint, ghostly luminescence in the crushing dark of the Mariana Trench. It does not hunt for food. It circles, it watches. It remains as a silent guardian over a graveyard of ships older than humanity itself. For the duration of this descent, we will immerse ourselves in this haunted silence. Forget the world above. Let the weight of the abyss carry you into the deep as we follow the phantom into the dark. Listen closely, for in this darkness, secrets are the only currency. The Phantom Sentinel. The Mariana Trench is not a place. It is a condition, a state of existence so removed from everything the surface world considers normal light. Warmth, pressure, measured in units, the human body was designed to survive. That to call it a place implies a familiarity it has never earned and never will. You do not visit the Mariana Trench the way you visit a city or a shoreline or even a mountain. You descend into it. You are received by it. And the receiving is one-directional. The trench takes what comes to it and keeps what it chooses. And what it chooses to keep it keeps forever. In the cold and the dark and the 11,000 meters of water pressing down from above, we are descending now. The numbers on the depth gauge increase with a steadiness that feels ceremonial. 1,000 meters, 2,000, the light from the surface that thin, diffused. Already dim light that filters down through the first few hundred meters of ocean is long gone, has been gone for hours. We are past the twilight zone, past the midnight zone, past the boundaries that oceanographers use to divide the water column into categories the human mind can process. We are in the Hadal Zone now, the zone named for Hades, the underworld, the place below, the place below, the place. 3,000 meters, 4,000. The pressure outside this hull is being measured in units that require explanation before they can be understood. At the bottom of the Mariana Trench, at Challenger Deep, the deepest surveyed point on the planet, the pressure is approximately 1,086 bars, 1,086 times the atmospheric pressure at the surface. If you placed your hand outside this vehicle, the water would not feel like water. It would feel like a wall, a solid, immovable, geometrically perfect wall pressing inward from every direction simultaneously. Not painful, not anything, simply final. 5,000 meters, 6,000. The vehicle descends at a rate that makes the distance feel abstract. We have been descending for hours and we are not yet at the bottom. This is the scale of the trench, not the scale of a canyon or a valley or any terrestrial feature the imagination can reach for. The Mariana Trench is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. If you placed Everest at the bottom of Challenger Deep, its summit would still be more than 2 kilometers below the ocean surface. The trench does not fit inside any comparison that makes it smaller. It simply is what it is. Vast, patient, indifferent. 7,000 meters. The sonar is showing the walls of the trench now, the steep slopes of the Hadal Zone rising on both sides. The V-shaped profile of a geological feature created by the subduction of the Pacific Plate. Beneath the Mariana Plate, the rock here is ancient. The oldest oceanic crust on the planet, descending into the mantle at a rate of a few centimeters per year, carrying with it the sediment record of everything that has ever fallen through the water column above. Hundreds of millions of years of marine snow compressed into layers, going down into the earth itself. 8,000 meters. The temperature outside is just above freezing, 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. Cold that is not the cold of a winter morning or an ice bath or any experience the surface world provides. It is the cold of the permanent absence of solar energy, the cold of water that has not been touched by sunlight in geological time, the cold of something that has never been warm and has no concept of warmth as a state that exists. 9,000 meters. We are approaching it now. The sonar has been showing an anomaly for the past 40 minutes. Not the walls of the trench. Those are clear, defined, expected. Not the seafloor that is still 2,000 meters below us. Something in the water column. Something that the sonar returns as a soft, irregular mass, moving slowly. Not drifting, the distinction is important. Drifting implies passivity, the movement of something carried by current or sinking by gravity. This is moving, directed at a speed and in a pattern that the sonar technician has described, in a voice carefully emptied of interpretation as purposeful. We reduce our descent rate. The lights extend outward into the dark and illuminate water that is, as it has been for the past 7,000 meters, empty. Fine particles, the ghost of marine snow, reduced to almost nothing by the time it reaches this depth. The organic content consumed by bacteria and chemistry over the weeks it took to fall this far. The water is clear in the way that very deep water is clear, not blue, not any color, just the transparent medium through which the lights travel until the lights give out and the dark resumes. Then the edge of the light catches something. It is not what the imagination produces when told that something vast and ancient is in the water ahead of you. The imagination reaches for scale, for something that fills the viewport, that dwarfs the vehicle, that announces itself with the authority of size. What the lights find is subtler than that, a translucence, a quality of the water ahead that is different from the water around it, not different in color, not different in turbidity, but different in the way that glass is different from air when you are not expecting glass. A refraction, a bending of the light that suggests a boundary, a surface, a material through which light passes but does not pass unchanged. We move closer. The translucence resolves. There are no words in the standard vocabulary of marine biology that describe what the lights are now revealing at the edge of their range. This is not a failure of science. Science has simply not had the opportunity to build the vocabulary. Because science has not been here before, has not seen this before, has not had to find language for a thing that has existed. In the total dark of the Hadal Zone, without a human observer to require a name for it, what we are seeing is this. A body, and the word body is used in the broadest sense. the sense of a coherent physical form occupying a defined space of enormous size. The full extent is not visible from this position. What the lights reveal is a portion of it, a cross-section of something that continues beyond the reach of the lights in multiple directions. The surface of this body is translucent, not transparent. You cannot see through it clearly, cannot make out distinct structures on the far side, but translucent in the way of certain deep-sea medusae, certain siphonophores, the way of organisms that have evolved in permanent darkness and have no need for pigmentation, no need for the chromatic complexity of creatures that live where light is available to see and be seen by. Through the translucent surface, something glows, not brightly, not with the dramatic bioluminescence of an anglerfish lure or the vivid pulses of a cone jellyfish in shallow water. This is quieter than that, structural, as if the light is emanating not from specialized organs, but from the organism's framework itself, from whatever internal architecture provides its form and holds its shape in water at this pressure. A skeletal luminescence, the cold blue-white of deep ice or of stars seen through atmosphere, patterned in a way that suggests geometry, regular, repeating, distributed evenly through the visible portion of the body. The Phantom Sentinel glows like a building seen from a distance at night, like a structure lit from within, every window the same cold light, every room occupied by the same patient illumination. We hold position. The sentinel moves, slowly, not toward us, or not yet toward us, but in the arc of the pattern the sonar has been tracking. A circle, a long, gradual, unhurried arc that the sonar suggests has a radius of approximately 400 meters. 400 meters of dark water, and at the center of the circle, the sea floor. We are not yet close enough to see what is on the sea floor at the center of that circle, but the sonar is showing hard returns from the bottom, not the soft, diffuse return of sediment. Hard returns, structured returns, the return of things with edges. The sentinel completes a portion of its arc, and we follow at a distance that feels simultaneously too close and not close enough. Too close because the thing is vast and real in a way that numbers and sonar returns had not prepared us for. Not close enough because the lights cannot resolve the full extent of it, cannot show us what the front of it looks like, or whether front is even a meaningful concept for something this shape. It is roughly ovoid. What we can see suggests an ovoid form, elongated on one axis, rounded on all others, widest at its midpoint, and tapering toward both ends. The size is difficult to estimate without reference objects, but the sonar returns a length of approximately 60 meters for the visible portion, and the visible portion is not the full animal. The sonar suggests the complete form is significantly larger. We stop trying to estimate and simply watch. It continues its circle. We follow its arc, and the sea floor comes into view beneath us. The lights reach the bottom at this point. We are close enough now, at 10,000 meters depth, that the sea floor is visible below the vehicle. And what the lights find on the sea floor is what the hard sonar returns were signaling, what the sentinel has been circling, what it has been, in whatever sense the word applies to something we cannot yet classify, watching. Ships, not the clean, preserved ships of an anoxic dead zone. These are different. These are old in the way that things are old when they have been subjected to pressure and cold and time measured in centuries. The hulls have collapsed. The wood, where wood remains, has darkened to the color of the sediment around it. The metal fittings, where metal was used, which is not everywhere, because these ships predate metal fittings, in some cases have corroded into shapes that suggest their original form without replicating it, but the shapes are recognizable. The arrangement of keel and rib, the curve of a hull, the shadow of a mast lying across pale sediment. There are many of them. The count is difficult. The seafloor at this location is not a flat plain but a complex terrain, and the ships are not arranged in any pattern that makes enumeration simple. They are distributed across a large area of the seafloor, some partially buried by sediment, some more exposed. But the lights and the sonar together suggest dozens of vessels of different sizes and different constructions and different eras, accumulated over a period of time that the sediment layers could help date but that we cannot determine from this position. A graveyard, an accumulation of every vessel that happened to sink in the waters above this particular point of the trench. Over however many centuries, ships have crossed this part of the Pacific. The trench is not uniformly deep. It has topography, basins and ridges and slopes, and the vessels that sank nearby would have come to rest at the bottom of the deepest available basin. Here, in the basin whose walls rise steeply on three sides. In the basin where the Phantom Sentinel circles, we watch it complete another arc. The Sentinel does not interact with the ships, does not descend toward them, does not touch them, does not alter its course as it passes over portions of the graveyard. It simply circles, the slow, patient, luminescent circle that the sonar has been tracking since we first detected it. 400 meters of radius, a circuit that takes, at this speed, approximately 40 minutes to complete, and then again, and then again. How long has it been doing this? The question has no answer available to us. We have been here for hours. The Sentinel was already circling when the sonar first found it. The ships below have been here for centuries. The trench has been here for millions of years. The organisms circling above the graveyard of ships. If organism is the right category, if biology is the right framework, has been here for a duration. We cannot determine and would not know how to measure if we could. It does not hunt. Nothing down here provides food that would explain a predator of this size. And the Sentinel shows no hunting behavior, no strikes, no pursuit, no changes in the pattern of its movement that suggests prey detection or acquisition. It eats, presumably, in ways we have not observed. It lives, demonstrably, in conditions we had not expected to support life of this complexity. It circles, continuously, above a collection of sunken ships at the bottom of the deepest trench on Earth. The bioluminescence shifts, not dramatically, a subtle change in the intensity of the structural glow, brighter for a moment across a section of the visible body, then returning to the baseline cold luminescence, like a pulse, like a signal, like something that, in a different context, in a shallower ocean, we would call communication. We do not know what it is communicating. We do not know if communication is the right word. We do not know if there is something else down here, something beyond the range of our lights and our sonar, that the signal is directed toward. We reduce our lights to minimum. Hold, position, watch. The Sentinel continues its circuit above the graveyard. The ships below hold their positions in the sediment as they have held them for centuries. The water around us is cold and pressurized and dark and full of the faint, structural light of something we have no category for. The trench walls rise above us on three sides. The Pacific Ocean presses down from 11 kilometers above. There are things in this world that science has not yet reached. Not because the science is inadequate. The instruments work, the data is real, the sonar returns are accurate. But because the world is larger than the science currently extended into it. Because the ocean covers 70% of this planet's surface and most of it has never been visited. And the parts that have been visited briefly and incompletely and with instruments that capture only a fraction of what is present. The Sentinel glows in the dark, patient, ancient, circling. It was here before the first of those ships sank to the seafloor below it. It will be here after the last hull dissolves into the sediment and the ships become indistinguishable from the trench floor that holds them. It will be here when our vehicle has ascended back to the surface and the records have been filed and the arguments about classification and biology and the limits of known science have run their course. It will still be here, circling, in the cold, in the pressure, in the 11,000 meters of dark water that separates the bottom of the Mariana Trench from the sunlit surface of the Pacific, watching the ships that will never sail again, keeping whatever vigil it has kept since before any human eye saw any ocean, since before any human hand built any ship, since before any of the things we call history had begun. The abyss does not end. It continues below us and to the sides of us, and in the record of geological time that the sediment layers carry, layer by layer, down into the rock below the sediment, and the mantle below the rock, and the iron heart of the planet below the mantle. And in the abyss, things persist, things that do not need our names for them, things that do not need our observation to exist, things that have been exactly what they are, doing exactly what they do, in exactly this darkness, for durations that make our entire recorded history look like an afterthought. The Phantom Sentinel glows, the ships sleep, the trench waits, as it has always waited, for whatever comes next. We have been at this depth for 3 hours and 40 minutes. The instruments are nominal. The hull is holding. The oxygen recyclers are processing at standard efficiency. The batteries are at 51%, enough to complete the observation window and begin the long ascent back through the water column to the surface support vessel waiting 11 kilometers above. Everything that engineering and planning and the careful preparation of experienced people can control is controlled, and within parameters, and the Sentinel continues its circuit. We have now observed 11 complete arcs, 11 circuits of the 400-meter radius. 11 times the luminescent form has passed through the portion of the water column illuminated by our reduced lights. And 11 times it has continued into the dark beyond our visibility. And 11 times the sonar has tracked it through the remainder of its arc and returned it to visibility on the next pass. The timing is consistent. The radius is consistent. The structural bioluminescence maintains its cold, even intensity with only the occasional pulse we noted earlier. Those brief brightenings that pass across a section of the body and fade back to baseline. We have begun to think of the pulses as breathing. This is anthropomorphization. We know it is anthropomorphization. The pulses may have nothing to do with respiration, may be electrical, may be communicative, may be the surface expression of some internal process that has no analog in any biology we have previously studied. But the interval is regular enough, and the quality of the light change consistent enough, that the brain reaches for the nearest available category. Breathing, the slow, deep breathing of something very large and very old, in a very cold and very dark place. 22 seconds between pulses. We noted this. We noted it without comment at first, a data point, a measurement to be recorded and later analyzed. But 22 seconds is a number with a particular quality at this depth, in this dark, watching this thing complete its patient circuits above the graveyard below. 22 seconds is long enough that you can hold your own breath for the interval, long enough that you can sit in the silence between one pulse and the next, and feel the silence as a physical thing, as a weight, as the accumulated pressure of everything above pressing down through 11 kilometers of ocean. We have been holding our breath between pulses without deciding to. The ships below have their own silence. We descended closer to the seafloor during the Sentinel's 7th circuit, moved the vehicle downward while the translucent form was on the far side of its arc, reduced the distance between us and the graveyard to perhaps 30 meters above the sediment, and directed the lights across the accumulated holes. The closest vessel to our position is old, older than the others nearby, or at least older in appearance, the wood reduced to its darkest possible state. The structure collapsed inward along the keel line, the ribs visible as a series of curved shadows in the sediment like the outline of something that was once alive and is now simply the record of its own former shape. It is small, perhaps 12 meters in length when it was whole, the kind of vessel that crossed the Pacific, not in the era of maps and instruments, but before that in the era of stars and currents, and the accumulated knowledge of people who learned the ocean, well enough to sail it without the tools we would now consider minimum requirements for the attempt. How it came to be here is a story the sediment has absorbed. Storms, navigation, error, the simple, indifferent fact of the ocean being larger and more powerful than any vessel that attempts to cross it. Whatever the sequence of events on the surface above, the ending is the same. The vessel descended through 11 kilometers of water and came to rest here, in the basin at the bottom of the deepest trench on Earth, and the Sentinel was already circling when it arrived. Or perhaps the Sentinel arrived after. We do not know the chronology. We do not know whether the Sentinel is a fixture of this location, something that has been here as long as the trench itself, as long as the water has been this deep and this cold and this hostile to everything except whatever the Sentinel is, or whether it came to the graveyard, as the ships did, from somewhere else, whether it found the ships and chose to circle them, or whether the ships found the Sentinel by sinking through the water column toward whatever the Sentinel had already claimed as its territory. Territory is another anthropomorphism. We are running out of frameworks. The Sentinel completed its 8th circuit while we were studying the old hole below us, and on the 9th circuit it passed closer to our vehicle than on any previous pass. Not dramatically closer, the nearest point of approach was perhaps 80 meters, compared to the 120 meters of the closest previous pass, but close enough that the full visible portion of the body was within the range of our minimum lights, and for approximately 4 minutes we had the clearest view we have yet had of its surface. The translucence is not uniform. This is what the closer approach revealed. The surface of the Sentinel is not evenly translucent. There are regions of greater and lesser opacity distributed across the visible body in a pattern that, at this closer range, begins to suggest structure. Thicker regions where the material of the outer surface is denser, where less light passes through and the internal luminescence appears only as a faint glow behind opacity. Thinner regions where the translucence approaches transparency and the structural bioluminescence is visible with more clarity. Individual points of light rather than diffuse glow, arranged in lines and clusters that the eye tries to resolve into patterns, the way the eye always tries to resolve things into patterns. The structural lights are not random. The points of bioluminescence that run through the visible interior of the Sentinel are distributed along lines that repeat, regular intervals, consistent spacing, the geometry of something that grew according to a plan, not the chaotic, opportunistic growth of something responding to immediate environmental pressures, but the organized, bilateral, mathematically consistent growth of something that developed according to a program written into its biology over an enormous span of evolutionary time. We photographed everything. The photographs will be studied by people with more expertise and more context than we currently have access to. They will be peer-reviewed and argued over and possibly dismissed and possibly accepted and will contribute, in whatever measure they contribute, to the slow accumulation of human knowledge about what exists in the parts of this planet we have not previously looked at carefully. But the photographs cannot capture what's sitting in this vehicle at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and watching the Sentinel pass 80 meters away actually feels like the photographs will show the translucence and the structural lights and the ovoid form and the scale. They will not show the silence. They will not show the 11 kilometers of water above. They will not show the graveyard below, the collapsed holes in the sediment, the accumulated centuries of vessels that attempted the crossing and failed and came to rest in the basin, where the Sentinel circles. Photographs are evidence. Evidence is not experience. The Sentinel moved back into the dark beyond our lights and continued its arc. We ascended back to our observation position above the graveyard and held there, watching the sonar track the Sentinel through the invisible portion of its circuit. The sonar return has a quality now that it did not have when we first detected it. A familiarity. We know the shape of the return. We know the timing of the arc. The instrument is showing us something we have spent hours with, and the brain has incorporated it into the category of known things, even though nothing about it is actually known. This is how the brain survives encounters with the genuinely unknown. It domesticates them. It watches long enough that the unknown becomes familiar, and familiar is a category the brain can function within. The Sentinel is still inexplicable. Its biology is still outside any framework we have, but it is the Sentinel now. It has a name. It has a pattern. It is the thing that circles above the graveyard at the bottom of the Mariana Trench with a 22-second pulse and a 400-meter radius. And that domestication, that naming and patterning is how we have continued to function in this vehicle for 4 hours at 11,000 meters depth in the presence of something for which we had no preparation. The trench does not care about our frameworks. The trench has been here for between 5 and 10 million years. The water in its deepest basin has been isolated from the surface ocean for spans of time measured in thousands of years. The sediment layers on its floor carry a record of everything that has fallen through the water column above, since before any human being existed to fall. The Sentinel, whatever it is, whatever category it eventually occupies in the taxonomy of things that live on this planet, has been doing what it does for a duration that none of our instruments can currently determine. And we have been here for 4 hours. The humility of that comparison is not a comfortable thing to sit with in a sealed metal vehicle, at the bottom of the deepest place on Earth. It is, however, an accurate thing. 4 hours against millions of years. The brief, instrumental, carefully planned incursion of surface creatures into a world that has never needed them, never registered their presence in any way that matters, never noticed the difference between the time before human beings looked at it and the time after, except that on the 12th circuit, something changed. The Sentinel slowed, not stopped, did not stop. But the sonar showed the arc lengthening on one side, the western approach, the portion of the circuit that brings the Sentinel closest to our vehicle's position. The speed reduced from its consistent baseline to something measurably slower. The sonar technician called it out. We confirmed it against the previous 11 circuits. The timing was off by 40 seconds on the western approach. 40 seconds of slower movement, then a return to normal speed as the arc continued. The nearest point of approach on the 13th circuit was 60 meters. We did not change our lights, did not change our position, did not change anything about the vehicle's outputs, sound, electrical field, mechanical vibration. We held as still as the thrusters and the current would allow, and we watched the 60-meter approach on the viewport and the sonar simultaneously. And we tried to determine whether the slowing was a response to our presence, or a coincidence, or a variation in normal behavior. That our limited observation window was too short to have established as abnormal. We could not determine it. On the 14th circuit, the nearest approach was 55 meters. On the 15th circuit, 50 meters. Each approach incrementally closer. Each arc on the western side incrementally slower. The change was small enough that it could be instrument variation, behavioral variation within normal range. A current shift affecting the Sentinel's movement through the water. It could be anything. It could be nothing. It could be the thing that the part of the brain not occupied with scientific rigor was already quietly insisting it was. The Sentinel was aware of us. Had been aware of us, perhaps, since before we detected it. Had continued its circuit without alteration through 11 complete arcs, while we approached and observed and photographed and measured and named it, and now, on the 12th circuit, had begun the slow, incremental adjustment of its path that brought it, arc by arc, closer to the small metal vehicle that had descended into its territory and positioned itself above the graveyard it has kept for however many centuries it has kept it. We did not ascend. The protocol for an unexpected behavioral change in an observed organism is to maintain position and continue observation unless safety requires otherwise. The hull was intact. The systems were nominal. The batteries had sufficient charge for the planned ascent window. Safety did not require otherwise. We maintained position and continued observation. The 16th circuit brought the Sentinel to 40 meters, close enough that the full forward section of the visible body was illuminated by our minimum lights with a clarity we had not yet achieved. Close enough that the structural bioluminescence was visible in detail. The lines of cold light running through the translucent interior, the regular spacing, the bilateral symmetry that the closer approach confirmed definitively. Close enough that the surface texture was resolvable, not smooth, as we had initially assumed from greater distance, but finely structured, a texture of repeated small forms covering the outer surface, not scales, nothing so familiar as scales, something smaller and more regular and more numerous, covering the visible surface in a pattern that the cross-hatching of our lights revealed as three-dimensional rather than flat. The Sentinel passed through the light at 40 meters and continued its arc. The pulse, at this distance, was visible not just as a brightening of the internal lights, but as a subtle movement of the outer surface, a slight expansion, a slight contraction, the surface texture shifting fractionally with each 22-second cycle. The breathing interpretation suddenly felt less like anthropomorphism and more like an accurate description of a mechanical process observed without prejudice. It was breathing. Whatever breathing means for something this size, at this depth and this pressure, whatever the biological mechanism, the outer surface was moving in synchrony with the internal pulse. And movement in synchrony with a regular cycle is, in the biological framework we have, breathing. The Sentinel breathes. 22 seconds. The interval that we have been measuring for hours. The interval that has become, without intention, the rhythm of our own breathing in this vehicle. The interval that the deep ocean is now counting out in cold blue-white light 40 meters beyond the viewport. The 17th circuit brought it to 35 meters. At 35 meters, the size is no longer a number. At 35 meters, the size is a fact that the body registers independently of the mind, a somatic fact, a felt fact. The fact of being in close proximity to something vastly larger than you in an environment that provides no escape and no reference point for scale except the measurements on the instruments and the quality of the silence pressing against the hull from all directions. We were calm. This requires saying because it was not guaranteed. Calm is not the automatic response of human neurology to the presence of something inexplicable and enormous at 35 meters in the dark at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Calm was a choice made collectively and quietly by the people in this vehicle, the choice to continue functioning within the scientific framework, to continue measuring and recording, to continue doing the work that the descent was planned to do. The Sentinel passed at 35 meters. It did not pause, did not alter its arc at the nearest point of approach, did not, as far as our instruments could detect, produce any output, sound, electrical, chemical, directed toward our vehicle. It passed slowly through the illuminated water, its structural lights pulsing on their 22-second interval, its surface texture visible in detail, its full visible length occupying our forward viewport for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, of something that biology cannot currently explain. of something that has been in this trench, in this circuit, above this graveyard, for a duration we cannot determine, of something that exists because the ocean is larger than our knowledge of it, and the depths are stranger than our instruments have previously confirmed, and the dark has been running its own experiments for millions of years without any obligation to report the results to the surface. The Sentinel continued its arc into the dark. The sonar tracked it through the invisible portion of the circuit. We held position above the graveyard and breathed on the 22-second interval and watched the instruments and did not speak. The ships below held their positions in the sediment as they have held them since they arrived. The oldest ones whose wood has become the color of the trench floor itself. The newer ones whose metal fittings are still recognizable as fittings, whose hull shapes still describe the era and the culture that built them, all of them resting in the cold and the dark and the pressure. In the basin where the Sentinel circles, in the deepest place on Earth, there is a kind of peace in that. Not the peace of resolution. Nothing here is resolved, nothing explained, nothing categorized to the satisfaction of the science that sent us here, but the peace of the very old, the peace of things that have been exactly what they are for so long that the question of what they are has ceased to be urgent. The ships are ships. The trench is the trench. The Sentinel is the Sentinel, and the dark holds all of it with the same patient, pressurized, cold indifference with which it has always held everything that finds its way to the bottom. The 18th circuit began. We began our ascent, not because the protocol required it yet. The observation window still had time remaining, but because there was a rightness to leaving now at this moment, with the Sentinel beginning another arc and the graveyard below settling back into its sediment silence and the rain, falling 11 kilometers above on the surface of a Pacific Ocean that has no idea what is happening at its bottom. We left the lights at minimum as we rose. The Sentinel's bioluminescence receded below us as we ascended, the cold blue-white structural lights visible for longer than anything else. The last thing visible before the distance finally absorbed them. A faint glow in the dark below, then a suggestion of a glow, then nothing. Then the dark was uniform in all directions, and we were ascending through it, past 10,000 meters, past 9,000, the pressure decreasing in increments so small they were measurable only by the instruments. The Sentinel continued its circuit below. The ships continued their long, pressurized, lightless sleep. The trench continued to be what it has always been, a condition, not a place, a state of existence at the extreme end of what this planet produces. A darkness so complete, and a pressure so absolute, and a cold so permanent, that the word extreme stops meaning anything and the thing it was trying to describe simply becomes normal. The normal of the Hadal Zone, the normal of the Mariana Trench, the normal that has been running without interruption for millions of years, while the surface world built its cities, and its ships, and its instruments, and eventually, finally, found a way to come and look, and found in the looking that it was not empty, that the deep has its own inhabitants, its own rhythms, its own patient and luminescent version of a life that the surface world never imagined could exist here, that the dark is occupied, that the abyss is not waiting for us. It never was. It has its own purposes, its own ancient business, its own cold and glowing sentinel making its circuits above its graveyard in the deepest dark on earth. And it will still be there tomorrow, and the day after, and for every day after that, in the crushing cold, in the absolute dark, in the trench that holds everything that finds its way to its floor. Patient, luminous, waiting for nothing, present for everything. The rain is falling now, up above, on the surface, on the waves, and here, at the bottom, the sentinel glows. Rest now. Let the weight of the abyss hold you. You have been to the deepest place on earth, and the deepest place on earth has seen you, and found you in its patient and ancient and luminous way, worthy of one more slow circuit in the dark. Sleep. The trench keeps its vigil, as it always has, as it always will.